I never told my son about my $90,000 a month salary. His wife said, "Get out, you beggar." She threw my things. A month later, I bought the house of their dreams right across the street. They saw my moving truck and their faces said everything. The pot of chili was still warm when she called me a beggar. I want you to hold that image for a second. A 61-year-old woman standing on a porch she'd visited dozens of times, holding a ceramic pot with both oven-mitted hands, steam curling up into the Tuesday evening air, and a 34-year-old woman looking at her like she was something that had crawled up from a storm drain. "Get out," Kristen said. Not "please leave," not "this isn't a good time." Get out. Like I was a stray. Like I had wandered up from nowhere with nothing and had the audacity to knock on the door of people who mattered. "You've got nothing to offer. We don't need a penniless old woman camped out here." Behind her, through the open door, I could see my son Daniel. He was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, eyes down. He didn't look up, not once. 10 minutes later, my suitcase hit the porch beside me with a soft, dignified thud, the way expensive luggage lands even when it's been thrown. Daniel had carried it out, hadn't said a word, set it down and gone back inside like he'd just taken out the recycling. The television came on, loud, something cheerful, one of those home renovation shows where everyone laughs and the granite countertops are always perfect. I picked up my suitcase handle, chili still in one arm. I walked to my car. I did not cry. I want to be very clear about that, because what I felt in that moment wasn't grief. It was something colder and quieter and considerably more useful. It was the particular kind of clarity that only arrives after years of being underestimated, when someone finally underestimates you so spectacularly that the path forward becomes completely obvious. I checked into a Marriott. 9th floor, room 92, beige curtains, white sheets. A desk lamp that buzzed faintly if you listened for it. I set the chili on the desk. I opened my laptop, and I started looking at houses. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters, and because Kristen never bothered to find out. My name is Margaret Caldwell. I am 61 years old. I drive a 2014 Lexus ES with 94,000 miles on it. I clip grocery coupons from the Sunday paper, actual paper, with actual scissors, and I keep them in a little accordion folder in my glove compartment. I wear sensible shoes, low heels, good arch support, nothing flashy. My wardrobe is largely in earth tones: navy, camel, burgundy in winter. I look, in other words, exactly like what Kristen decided I was. That has always been a choice. For 19 years, I have been a senior financial compliance officer at Hartwell Meridian Capital, a private investment firm headquartered in Atlanta, with satellite offices in New York and London. I oversee regulatory risk for a portfolio worth just north of $4 billion. I have a staff of 11. I have never once been investigated. I have never once made a mistake that cost the firm a single dollar of liability. I earn $90,000 a month. I say this not to boast. I was raised by a woman who believed that talking about money was a form of spiritual poverty, but because it is the single most relevant fact in this story, and Kristen did not know it, not a whisper of it, because I never told her. I never told Daniel either, not the exact number. He knew I did well. He knew I owned my condo outright, that I took 2 international trips a year, that I had no debt. He just assumed I was comfortable in the way that quietly frugal women of a certain age appear comfortable, carefully, modestly, without abundance. Kristen assumed something else entirely. She assumed I was a burden. She came into Daniel's life 4 years ago, met him at a fundraiser, charmed him inside of 6 weeks, had a ring on her finger inside of 8 months. I want to be fair. Kristen is beautiful. She is the kind of woman who renovates a kitchen and somehow makes it look like a magazine already approved of her choices. Marble backsplash, unlacquered brass fixtures, a $4,000 refrigerator with a screen on the door. She is also a woman who has never, in all the time I've known her, asked me a single question about my life. Not one. I noticed the early signs and filed them carefully away. The Thanksgiving dinner, where she mentioned, twice, in different conversations, that Daniel had worked so hard to afford this house, looking at me, waiting for me to acknowledge something. The birthday lunch, where she asked, with a particular brightness in her eyes, whether I was managing okay on my pension. The Christmas when Daniel explained they wouldn't be making it to my place because of Kristen's family obligations, and I later found out she'd hosted a dinner party that same night for 12 of their friends. I told myself, she doesn't know you. Give her time. Not every daughter-in-law needs to love you. Enough if they respect you. I told myself this for 3 years. Then came that Tuesday evening with the chili and the suitcase and the television show, and I stopped telling myself things. Here is what happened in room 92 of the Atlanta Marriott on a Tuesday night. I opened my laptop and I searched Brookhaven real estate listings. I knew the neighborhood. I knew it better than Kristen realized, having driven those streets 100 times, dropping off casseroles and birthday cakes, and yes, chilly, quiet streets, old oaks, houses that had been updated inside but wore their age gracefully outside. The kind of neighborhood where people wave at each other from driveways and leave tomatoes from their gardens on each other's porches. I was not being exiled from some foreign territory. This was not her kingdom. She happened to live there. I searched for 40 minutes. Then I found it. 412 Whitmore Lane, colonial-style house, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, black shutters, a wraparound porch that ran the full width of the front face and hooked around the left side, a magnolia tree in the front yard, old enough that it had its own presence, the kind of tree that makes a property feel like it has always known it was beautiful. Asking price, $1.2 million. It was directly across the street from Daniel and Kristen's house. I looked at the listing photos for a long time. The light in the front rooms, the original hardwood floors, the porch with its white balusters, and the way the magnolia tree's shadow fell across the steps in the late afternoon. Then I looked at my brokerage account. I had considerably more than enough. I picked up my phone and called Beverly Chen, Skipper, 18 years in real estate law, former assistant district attorney, currently the sharpest transactional attorney in Atlanta, and the only person on earth besides my accountant who knew my full financial picture. I had referred 3 colleagues to her over the years. She owed me nothing, and I owed her nothing, which is precisely why I trusted her completely. It was 11:14 p.m. She answered on the 3rd ring. Margaret, it's late. I want to buy a house, I said. A pause. Wonderful. Where? Across the street from my son. Beverly is not a woman given to dramatic pauses. This was a dramatic pause. Margaret, she said finally, that is either very strategic or very dramatic. Can it be both? I heard her exhale, not exasperated, more like a woman recalibrating. Tell me everything. I told her about the chili, the suitcase, the television. I kept it factual, without embellishment, the way I write compliance reports. Just the sequence of events and the relevant actors. When I finished, Beverly was quiet for 3 seconds. Cash offer, she said, through your LLC. We keep your name off it until closing. Exactly what I was thinking. I'll have a preliminary look at the listing in the morning. Don't make any contact with the sellers or their agent until I've reviewed the disclosure documents. Of course. Margaret, yes? I want you to know that I am professionally advising you on a legal real estate transaction. Another pause. I'm also, personally, completely thrilled. The offer went in at asking price. Cash, no contingencies, 15-day inspection window, 3-week close. In a market where most buyers were still fighting mortgage rates, a clean cash offer from a well-structured LLC with no chain to manage was the kind of thing sellers dream about. The listing agent called Beverly within 2 hours of submission. Accepted. I stayed at the Marriott for 3 days while Beverly's team handled the paperwork. During that time, Daniel texted me once. Mom, I'm sorry about Tuesday. Things have been stressful. Hope you're okay. I read it 4 times. Then I put my phone face down on the desk and went back to reviewing the inspection report. The house was in excellent condition. The inspector, Marcus Webb Property Inspections, 22 years in the field, found 1 hairline crack in the basement foundation that required monitoring and a water heater that would need replacing within 2 years. Everything else was solid. The bones were good. The systems were updated. The house closed on a Thursday morning in early September. Caldwell Heritage Properties, LLC, became the owner of 412 Whitmore Lane at 10:47 a.m. My name appeared nowhere in the public-facing transaction documents. Beverly had handled everything through the LLC's accounts. I signed the papers at Beverly's office. She handed me the keys in a small white envelope. How do you feel? She asked. Like someone who just bought a house, I said. She smiled. The movers are confirmed for Saturday, 8 a.m., and you're not going to warn him. It wasn't a question. She already knew the answer. But she asked it anyway, the way good attorneys do, to make sure the decision was mine and not just momentum. No, I said. I'm not going to warn him. I drove to Whitmore Lane that evening, parked in the driveway of my new house, sat in the car for a few minutes and looked at the front of the building in the last hour of daylight, the magnolia tree casting its long shadow across the lawn, the black shutters precise and clean against the white siding. Across the street, lights were on in Daniel and Kristen's house. I could see the blue flicker of the television in the front room. I drove home to my condo to pack. Saturday morning, Atlanta pressed down with the particular weight of early September heat, the kind that arrives before 9 a.m. and makes the air feel like a damp cloth. I was on the wraparound porch of 412 Whitmore Lane at 7:52 a.m. with a clipboard, an iced coffee from the gas station on Peachtree Road, and a very clear head. Bellhaven Moving Company, Garrett Bellhaven, owner-operated 15 years in residential moves, arrived at 8:03. 6 men, 2 trucks, efficient, professional, and blessedly quiet. I had given Garrett a detailed floor plan and a numbered inventory. By 9:30, the trucks were half empty, and the house was beginning to look like somewhere a person actually lived. At 10:27, I heard Kristen's front door open. I didn't look up immediately. I was making a note on my clipboard, the floor lamp for the front sitting room, which I decided to move to the study instead. I finished the note, capped the pen. Then I looked across the street. Kristen was standing on her front porch in black leggings and an oversized white tee, coffee mug in hand, staring at the moving trucks. Her face had that particular arrangement of features that precedes complete social destabilization. Not quite angry yet, not quite confused, not quite anything, because all 3 were arriving simultaneously, and her brain was sorting through them. Daniel appeared behind her in the doorway, blue t-shirt, bare feet. He looked at the trucks, looked at the house, looked at the trucks again. Kristen crossed the street. I watched her come. She had the walk of a woman who has never been told no by anything she couldn't eventually outlast, and who finds uncertainty personally offensive. By the time she reached my driveway, her face had settled on outrage as the primary emotion. What is going on? She demanded. Good morning, I said. This is yours? She gestured at the house with her coffee mug, some of it sloshed. Yes. You bought this? I did. How? I smiled. Not warmly, just politely, the way you smile at a very loud child in a restaurant when you're choosing not to engage. With money, I said. Daniel had come to the end of the driveway. He stood at the property line, bare feet on the asphalt. He was looking at the house with an expression I recognized from when he was 9 years old and had broken something valuable, a kind of preemptive lynching, like a person person bracing for a consequence they already know is coming but can't yet see the shape of. Kristen stepped closer to me. Her voice dropped, not softer, just more concentrated, like she was choosing to aim rather than broadcast. You did this to harass us. I bought a house that was for sale, I said, across the street from us. Yes. You expect us to believe that's a coincidence? No, I said. I looked at her steadily. I expect you to understand that your expectations are no longer relevant to my decisions. Behind me, one of Garrett's men appeared in the doorway carrying a brass floor lamp. Front sitting room, ma'am? Actually, study, north wall. Copy that. The man disappeared back inside. The normalcy of it, the absolute quotidian professionalism of a mover doing his job while I stood on my porch having this conversation, seemed to vibrate through Kristen like a tuning fork. Her face went pink, then a deeper pink, the blotchy kind that doesn't come from heat. This is insane, she said. This isn't normal behavior. Normal, I said. Like throwing a woman's suitcase onto a porch and calling her a beggar? Silence. Not comfortable silence. The kind that has weight and temperature. Kristen turned to Daniel, still standing at the property line, still looking at the house. Say something, she hissed at him. He looked at the house, then at me, then, and this is the moment I will remember longest, he asked, what do you want me to say? Not mom, I'm sorry, not this is a lot, not can we talk about this? Just, what do you want me to say? A man waiting to be scripted. A man who had outsourced his conscience so completely that confronted with his mother standing on a porch across the street from his house, the only available question was a request for instructions. That answer told me more about the last 3 years than anything else that had happened. Kristen stepped closer to me again. Her voice went low, a different kind of low, not confiding, threatening. We'll get a restraining order. You've crossed the street and come onto my property to confront me, I said pleasantly. I've stayed right here, but good luck with that. She held my gaze for a moment, then she smiled, the cold, certain smile of a woman who believes she has resources you don't. Enjoy this while it lasts, Margaret. I intend to, I said. She turned and walked back across the street. Precise steps, head up, the walk of a woman performing dignity for whatever audience she imagined was watching. Daniel lingered, just for one breath. Too. Mom, he said quietly. I didn't know. I looked at him, my son, 41 years old, standing barefoot at the edge of someone else's property. I had changed his diapers. I had sat with him through 3 hospitalizations before he was 12, 2 ear infections bad enough to require surgery, 1 broken arm from a bicycle. I had worked double hours for 3 years straight when his father left, so that Daniel would never once feel the shape of that financial drop. I had done everything a mother could do, and I had been proud to do it, and I would do it again. Didn't know what? I asked. He glanced back at Kristen, who was standing in the doorway watching him. Then he shook his head, turned, followed her inside. The door closed. I made a note on my clipboard. 3 days later, I received a letter. It came through Beverly's office, forwarded by courier. The letterhead read Hollis and Vance, attorneys at law. The letter, signed by one R. Patrick Hollis, alleged that my purchase of 412 Whitmore Lane constituted targeted harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a coordinated campaign of psychological intimidation, directed at my son and daughter-in-law. It requested in formal legalese that I spent a mildly entertaining 20 minutes reading, that I sell the property immediately and at fair market value, and cease all provocative proximity conduct. I forwarded it to Beverly with one line, have fun. Beverly's response was 4 pages, single-spaced. She later described it to me as polite. Based on the sections she read me over the phone, I would characterize it as technically polite in the way that a controlled demolition is technically organized. It addressed point by point the legal impossibility of each claim, cited 3 relevant Georgia court decisions, included a brief but cogent note on the constitutional right to purchase lawfully available property, and closed with a reminder that any further communication of this nature could itself constitute tortious interference with a lawful real estate transaction. R. Patrick Hollis never wrote back. Beverly said she wasn't surprised. He probably charged them $1,500 for that letter, she told me. The reply would have cost them another $5 to respond to, and he knows he has nothing. I thought about Kristen writing that check. The particular flavor of helplessness that comes when you reach for a weapon and find it made of cardboard. I did not feel sorry for her. What I had not anticipated, what I had not fully calculated in room 912 at the Marriott on that Tuesday night, was how the neighborhood would respond. Brookhaven is a neighborhood of people who have lived there long enough to care about it. The kind of place where people know each other's dogs by name and bring meals when someone has surgery. I had been a visitor to this neighborhood for 4 years, coming and going, but I had paid attention. I had learned names, I remembered details. 2 days after I moved in, Nora Finch from 4 houses down brought me a peach cobbler. Nora was 73, a retired school teacher, and had the specific warmth of a woman who has given decades to other people's children, and found it entirely worth it. She sat on my porch for an hour and told me about the neighborhood with the intimate knowledge of someone who had watched it for 30 years. At some point she mentioned Daniel and Kristen. Nice looking house, she said carefully in the tone people use when they have something more to say and are deciding whether to say it. I said. She's very particular, Nora offered. Kristen, about the aesthetics of things. A pause. I brought them a casserole when they moved in. She emailed me later to say it had the wrong kind of cheese for her dietary needs. Nora looked at me over her cobbler, which she had not mentioned when she accepted it. I took a bite of peach cobbler. It was the best thing I'd eaten in 2 weeks. Some people are very particular, I said. Nora smiled. How long long have you been her mother-in-law? 4 years. Bless your heart, Nora said, in the Georgia accent that makes that phrase mean 3 completely different things depending on context. This one I was certain meant, I see exactly what's happening here. Within 2 weeks, I knew 6 families on the block. I had coffee with Marcus and Diane Abelson, who had 2 kids at the school around the corner. I had a glass of wine with the Tremaines, who had the corner lot and the impeccable herb garden. I attended the neighborhood association meeting on a Wednesday evening and introduced myself as a recent transplant who was very much looking forward to getting to know the area. Not once did I say a word about Kristen. I didn't need to, because here's the thing about neighborhoods. They have memories. They have the accumulated knowledge of dozens of small interactions. The way someone waves back or doesn't, the way someone treats the mail carrier, the way someone responds when a ball rolls into their yard. Kristen's reputation in Brookhaven was not my construction. It was already fully built and had been for years. I simply moved in across the street from it. 6 weeks after I moved in, something happened that I had not planned. I want to be clear about that. I did not engineer what followed. I made one phone call, yes, but the rest of it, the shape of it, the scale of it, the way it ultimately arrived at Kristen's door, that was not my architecture. It began with a call from Thomas Beaumont. Thomas Beaumont, CPA, had been my personal accountant for 11 years. Meticulous, quiet, the kind of man who finds genuine pleasure in a clean balance sheet. He called me on a Thursday morning to flag something in a review of my estate documents. Margaret, I need to ask you about a disbursement. Approximately 8 months ago, $14,000. The payee is listed as a wedding event company, Sterling Event Design. I was quiet for a moment. Thomas, I didn't authorize any such disbursement. Another quiet moment. A longer one. I was afraid of that, he said carefully. I'm looking at your power of attorney documentation. Daniel was added as a secondary POA holder 18 months ago, at your request, for emergency medical decisions only. You'll recall this was after your cardiac screening flagged that irregular rhythm. Yes, that was specifically and exclusively for medical decisions. The disbursement went through under that authorization, Thomas said. Margaret, I have to ask you to sit down before I tell you the next part. I sat. $14,000 was used to pay the venue deposit for Daniel and Kristen's renewal of vows ceremony, planned for March of next year, Sterling Event Design, Buckhead location. The sound I heard was the sound of a very specific kind of silence, the kind that arrives when a thing you have told yourself was impossible turns out to be true. I thought about Daniel standing at my driveway barefoot. I didn't know. Maybe that was true too. Maybe he didn't know about this one. Maybe Kristen had found the POA documents in Daniel's files, understood their limitations, and proceeded anyway, calculating that I would either not notice or not be willing to pursue it without fracturing what was left of my relationship with my son. That was a calculation I found very interesting. Thomas, I said, I want you to document everything. Exact transaction records, authorization chains, timestamps. I want a complete file within the week. Already started, he said. And Thomas, please loop in Beverly Chen. Of course, he said. I had her on speed dial when I called you. I did not confront Daniel directly. Beverly advised against it, and I agreed with her reasoning. If Kristen had acted unilaterally, and the evidence strongly suggested she had, then a direct confrontation would give her time to construct a narrative before we had the full picture. Beverly partnered with Cassandra Reeves, a forensic financial investigator with Reeves and Associates, who had spent 12 years at the FBI's white-collar crime division before going private. Cassandra was 47, precise in a way that reminded me of a very well-calibrated instrument, and had the disconcerting habit of discovering things in financial records that shouldn't be there. Within 3 weeks, Cassandra had found 4 additional disbursements, $31,000 total, over 19 months, all processed under Daniel's POA authorization. All payees connected to Kristen's personal projects. The renewal of vows venue, a luxury spa retreat, custom furniture for what appeared to be a home office redesign, and a deposit on a luxury vacation rental in Costa Rica for the following spring. All without my knowledge. All without my consent. I sat with Beverly and Cassandra in Beverly's conference room on a Friday afternoon and looked at the documentation spread across the table. Bank statements, transaction logs, POA documents, vendor receipts, email confirmations from Sterling Event Design addressed to Kristen Caldwell, referencing a deposit paid by Margaret Caldwell. Is there any scenario, I asked, in which Daniel authorized these with genuine belief he had authority? Cassandra looked at me steadily. The POA language is explicit. Medical decisions only. The phrase financial transactions is not in it anywhere. There's no ambiguous reading. So either he knew, Beverly said carefully, or he didn't know Kristen was using his credentials. The logins used to process each transaction, Cassandra said, came from a device registered to Kristen's email account, her personal laptop. Silence. She did it herself, I said. That is what the evidence currently supports, Cassandra said. I looked at the files on the table. $31,000, a renewal of vows, a spa retreat, custom furniture, a vacation rental in Costa Rica, and on a Tuesday evening, she had called me a beggar. Beverly filed the complaint with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after I'd moved into 412 Whitmore Lane. Financial fraud, unauthorized use of power of attorney. The filing included Cassandra's complete investigative report, which Beverly later called genuinely the most thorough document I have submitted in 18 years of practice. The detective assigned to the case was Yvonne Marsh, 18 years in financial crimes. She called me the following Thursday to confirm receipt of the materials. Ms. Caldwell, she said, I want to be straightforward with you. POA fraud is taken seriously in this state, particularly when the victim is an elderly, a senior family member. I'm 61, I said, and I caught it myself. There was something that might have been a smile in her voice. Yes, the documentation made that fairly clear. I'll be in touch. Daniel found out about the investigation 11 days later, not from me, from Detective Marsh, who called him in for an interview to clarify the scope of his authorization and his awareness of the transactions. He called me that same afternoon. I answered on the third ring. Mom, his voice was different. The scripted quality was gone. What was underneath it was something rawer and more honest. The voice of a man who has just had the floor removed from a room he thought was solid. Mom, I need to talk to you. I know, I said. I didn't know about the money. I swear to you, I didn't know He stopped. She told me you'd offered to help with the vow renewal. She said you'd called her and offered. I didn't call her, I said. I have no record of any such call. Cassandra Reeves checked my phone records. He was quiet for a long time. Daniel, I said, I know this is very hard. I know you are in an impossible position right now, but I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly. Okay, did you know she called me a beggar? The silence this time was different, heavier, the kind with history in it. No, he said. I didn't hear what she said. He stopped again. I should have looked up from my phone, Mom. I should have. Yes, I said. You should have. I did not soften it. Sometimes love means not softening the true thing. Kristen was charged with fraudulent misuse of power of attorney and financial elder abuse under Georgia statute. The DA's office moved on it within 2 months of Beverly's filing, which Detective Marsh told me was unusually fast. A reflection, she said, of the quality of the documentation. The charges carried potential prison time. I will tell you honestly, I did not want her to go to prison. That was never what this was about. What I had wanted since the moment I walked to my car with a pot of chili and my son's silence ringing in my ears, was for the truth to be exactly as large as it was. No larger, no smaller, just true and documented and impossible to explain away. Kristen accepted a plea agreement. Restitution of the full $31,000 plus interest. 18 months of supervised probation, community service, a criminal record, her attorney, not R. Patrick Hollis, who had quietly exited the situation, negotiated to keep her out of prison. The DA agreed, partly because it was a first offense, and partly because Cassandra's report was so exhaustive that the case would have been an overwhelming public trial. Kristen's lawyer told Beverly afterward that his client had significantly underestimated the opposing party's level of preparation. Beverly told me this with what I can only describe as deep professional satisfaction. Daniel and Kristen are separated. He told me 3 months after the charges were filed. He did not ask me to be happy about it, and I was not. Separation is not a prize. Even when it's the right thing, it is the end of something, and endings always cost more than people expect. He came to my house on a Sunday afternoon in November. I made coffee. We sat on the wraparound porch, my porch, the one I had chosen specifically and deliberately, with full awareness of what I was doing, and we watched the magnolia tree drop its last fall leaves onto the lawn. I should have looked up from my phone, he said again. Yes, I said again, because it was still true. I didn't realize. He stopped, tried a different way in. I let her change how I saw you, the way she talked about you. Over time, he shook his head. I stopped seeing you. I poured more coffee. You see me now? I said. He looked at me, and I saw something in his face that I hadn't seen in years. Not guilt, not shame, but the particular look of a person recognizing someone they had almost permanently lost track of. Yeah, he said. I do. We sat there as the light moved across the yard. We didn't fix everything. We won't fix everything. Not quickly. And I've made my peace with that. Relationships are not balance sheets. They don't zero out neatly. They carry their history, and you work with what's there. But we sat together on my porch, across the street from the house where he'd once thrown out my suitcase and gone back inside to watch television. That evening, after Daniel had gone, I sat alone on the porch as the fireflies started up across the lawn, the last ones of the season, blinking their quiet signals in the November dark. Across the street, 218 Whitmore Lane was lit up. It had been on the market for 2 weeks. There was a lockbox on the door and a for sale sign in the yard. Daniel had moved out, and Kristen could not afford the mortgage alone. Her realtor had priced it correctly. 4 bedrooms in Brookhaven, good bones, tasteful renovations. The marble backsplash would look lovely in the listing photos. I sipped my coffee and watched the lights from neighboring houses reflect in the windows of the empty property across the street. 6 months earlier, Kristen had stood at her own front door and told me to get out, that I had nothing to offer, that I was penniless, that I was a beggar. She had been so certain of those things. I had stood there with a pot of chili, and I had let her be certain, and then I had walked quietly to my car and made better use of the certainty I already had. I raised one hand in a slow private wave toward the dark windows of 218 Whitmore Lane. No curtain moved this time. Nobody was watching, but I was still here.